Hello and welcome to a new series I'm starting called Alex's World Conflict News Roundup. The world is a screwed up place. I think a lot of people can agree on that. And something I kind of want to go over is some of the big world events going on with conflicts that you may have been missing out on because, you're not glued to the news as much as I am or someone who likes to follow this kind of stuff. So I'm just going to be going over a few topics twice a week for a little bit. I don't know how long I'm going to do this. It's just a trial episode. And from there, we will kind of discuss what each of these events have, the impacts, the outcomes, the etc. So the first thing that obviously is on the screen right now is what happened in Kyrgyzstan. And basically, the former president was charged with corruption, and because of that, the Kyrgyzstan Special Forces came in to arrest him. Now, he was a very liked president, and he had a lot of supporters. Thus, a standoff occurred. The supporters attacked the Special Forces, a police captain died, and then a tense battle over the capture of him basically occurred. Sorry if I'm, stuttering or quiet or something. It's kind of late, and I wanted to get this video out. So, yeah. So, one of the things we have to read is right here. So, they ordered him to be held in custody until August 26th. So, they eventually did capture him, and it was a 2-day operation. The first day, they did not get him, but they did light up part of his palace on fire, or his house residence. I don't know what it was. But, yeah, I don't want to pronounce his name too bad, but it was Adam Bayev, I think. Adam Bayev. It was their president, and he obviously did some corrupt things. They arrested him. He was a very pro-Russian president that got arrested. So obviously when you do stuff like that, that triggers Russia, and Russia, sometimes wants to get involved in those kind of materialistic aspects. So yeah, this is his residence. So yeah, the operation was on Wednesday. His supporters clashed with security forces, leaving one of them dead. They are all very heavily armed in Kyrgyzstan. When you get the typical AK-47 kind of impact, it's usually around this type of Central Asia. He ignored 3 police summons, so that's kind of important. He's obviously choosing to not following the law. And this tense political standoff could obviously have a huge global consequence, because the former president, who's in jail now, closed a U.S. base. He was very against the U.S. because he believed they were imperialists, and he was closer to pushing with the Russia's CSTO alliance. And this is coming at what's supposed to be happening this weekend, which is the Eurasian Economic Union. So these are the member states. Obviously, it's Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia. So basically just all former Soviet states. And now this is kind of throws a wrench in things because there's mass protests, there's international impact, and there's the threat of, potential civil war or some sort of conflict arising from this, or Russian intervention, whether it's political, military, or economic. So we'll see how that goes. I do have a update. I use this website. It's called liveuamap.com. I do not have an account, but I recommend getting one. It is monthly, but it obviously shows what's going on in the globe if you like following world events. So one of the big events that happened was, I believe, one of the leading... Let me find the article here. So yeah, there's a lot of weapons, etc. The Russian Prime Minister is heading towards Kyrgyzstan now for talks. And one of the things that happened recently was the head of a broadcasting group was arrested. I'm saying a lot, but I'm just trying to think out what I was going to say before. I do have a notepad you can see right here that's got some notes, but it's not a lot. So, yeah, there's definitely high tensions. This is a Russian airbase right there. There used to be a U.S. base, which was I don't know. I think it was like somewhere around here. Um, and China did not like that because it threatened them. But most importantly, this is the, going on and what's going on in Kyrgyzstan. So we will move on to the next country, and that is the big one. That is Kashmir. Now, this one is interesting to me. I was not expecting this. So if you don't know what happened, India revoked the special constitution they had with Kashmir that basically gave them a separate constitution and gave them greater autonomy. India revoked that, tried to reel them in and prevent separatism and stuff like that, but it really was just to piss off Pakistan. The interesting thing of it is the response from Pakistan is to ready its troops. India obviously did the same thing on most of its bases. Protests are obviously rapid right now, and there's 10,000 people protesting, according to this. So it's definitely, room for large protests and possible engagement with separatists later. And Pakistan obviously will not be having that, and they will suspend ties. So we'll move into this AFP article. It's kind of, I would agree, it is a powder keg move, but it's kind of Hindu nationalism at its finest right there. Obviously, that's not to take on India's Modi, but it's definitely something that will cause higher tensions, especially in a region full of already high tensions. So his excuse is it'll be part of a fully Indian union, enjoy more jobs, lower corruption, red tape, and the infrastructure projects would be expedited. So obviously he's, trying to come up with some reasons to defend his position to do this. Really, it's to more of a nationalism move than an economic move. It's political, not economic, in the end of it. It would not take military action at this time. This is interesting, but it did probably leave open the possibility. So they're going to take it up to the UN Security Council, and that's where it gets interesting, because Russia has actually said a few things about this, which we'll be going over. Anything else I should probably go over? Other than that, no. Pakistan and India, two countries that have fought in like 7 different wars or something like that, and had tensions earlier over a pilot who got shot down, and that was like a couple months ago. Okay. Kashmiri populace probably not have much of this, but so surprisingly, Russia chose to not get involved. And Russia has specifically said that they believe that that's in the rights of India's constitution. Here, the Russian foreign minister has said the changes associated with the change in status of Jammu and Kashmir and its division into the two unions are carried within the framework of the Constitution of the Republic of India. So they're actually defending India, which is surprising, because if you don't know, India is closely aligned with the U.S. and other Western countries, and Pakistan is aligned with China and kind of that Russia-esque type of country, but Russia has actually chose to support India in this, not directly support, but say what India is doing is fine, which shows their unwillingness to get involved in this conflict, and that could potentially prove beneficial to India, knowing they don't have to deal with international backlash, especially from a member of the United Nations Security Council, Russia. So we'll see how this develops. If I do a next episode, which I probably will, I could see this going to be a bigger issue and potential conflict may arise. So yeah, we will see what happens there. And next we will move on to Hong Kong. It's been in the news quite a bit recently. If you haven't been following, there is an extradition bill which basically states that China has the right to extradite people who are charged with crimes to mainland China from Hong Kong, which Hong Kong protesters think is getting rid of their autonomy and caused a lot of backlash. resulting in protests and the extradition bill dying, but not fully being dead, I guess, if that makes sense. It died in the vote, but it has the potential to be brought back up anytime. So that leads to more protests and an overall kind of Hong Kong political freedom movement. These protesters have actually decided to protest at Hong Kong International Airport, one of the biggest and most traveled airports in the world, to get international support. And I think that's kind of what their goal is to show that, what we're doing is to get international support within not only Hong Kong, but within everyone who goes there. Hong Kong is like a fifth of China's economy, so China obviously cannot, just say, whatever, Hong Kong, you do your own thing. So Carrie Lam is the head of the Hong Kong district, and she's very pro-China, so there's clashes and obviously room for more engagements between protesters and China. And earlier last month, we saw how the protesters stormed the Legislative Council and took it over for a few hours before they withdrew. There was live streams of it, but those were taken down because, I don't know why, I guess because it was like violent or stuff like that. The Hong Kong leader is basically saying, I don't care what these protests are doing, I'm not going to concede into any of your demands, and she says it's going to hurt Hong Kong's economy, which the protesters want, because a staggering economy leads to more protests over the economy and a greater push for more Hong Kong economic and political freedom. So far, the PRC, mainland China, has not gotten involved, which I think is kind of interesting, but I think they want to show that, they want to let them deal with that. So we'll see what happens there. International support. Obviously, the U.S. has issued travel warning along with Canada, France, and a few other countries, basically stating that they don't want to get involved and they don't want their people to be there in case something does happen. So definitely risk of threat there. One final point I want to bring up is the longevity of these protests. I believe that's how you say it. A lot of people are comparing this to the Yellow Vest movement in France, but I think this could be farther from the point. The Yellow Vest movement in France originated due to economic turmoil and pensions and other higher wages involving gas taxes and driving in general, where people who were urban, had to pay less than people who had to travel more. So I think this is going to last longer than the Yellow Vest movement. The Yellow Vest movement's still kind of there, but they achieved a lot. They gave in to a lot of demands, and the far right and far left and somewhere towards both sides kind of teamed up against Macron's government, and they obviously got what they wanted, but they're still protesting because they don't like Macron's government, which, I mean, it's hard being a centrist in 2019. So, yeah, I think this is going to be an interesting thing to follow. But I think that if mainland China does get involved, it could be deadly and could have huge international impact, especially in a time with a trade war, and other countries, pushing for greater democracy in the world, where Hong Kong struggles to fight for that. Okay, the next one is a fun one. Not really, I mean, people died, but something that has barely been on the news, and that's in Yemen. So, the kind of de facto capital of the democratic Yemen has gone under a huge battle because the Presidential Guard and Southern Separatists have been fighting for quite a bit now. And this kind of originated because Yemen's what most people call a failed state, right? It's 30 in a civil war with the Houthis, the Iran-backed Shiite group, I think it's called. And then there's the Democratic group backed by the U.S. and the Saudi coalition, the UAE, and Sudan, and a few other countries. So, basically what happened is in the 70s, there used to be a country called South Yemen, but then it was unified with regular Yemen to form one country. Some people didn't like that, and there's still been pushes to get a separate South Yemen, especially in the middle of a civil war. And this is kind of a stalemate in the works, right? Saudi troops had to deal with a bunch of spots that the UAE left. So the UAE pulled out a lot of troops from Yemen because, it was becoming too costly. So the Saudis had to arrive on scene, deal with the 8 Adin, I think it's pronounced. I'm horrible in pronunciation, so bear with me. And they have to deal with not only a southern port, but their entire front with the Houthis, which, like I said, is a stalemate, and I think it'll end up in a stalemate, even with the international pressure to end. So we'll see what happens there. I think the UN is going to work towards a peace deal, but like most things, the UN doesn't really accomplish anything, and I don't see a peace deal happening within the next 5 to 6 years. But I could be wrong. You never know. Politics are politics. I mean, we're working on a peace deal in the U.S. and the Taliban, so that could be happening within a few years. We never know. But yeah, that's the Yemen Battle of Aden, I guess people are calling it, but we don't know what's going to happen there. It's just something I wanted to bring up because it's happening, so we'll see if anything happens. I'm pretty sure they'll just regain control and kill a bunch of people who think they can start their own country. Finally, we have something that, well, not finally, there's still like a side thing I want to bring up, not too fast though. I want to bring up the big one, which is Iran. So there's been increased destability in the region, and that's due to Iran going on this kind of piracy expedition, taking a bunch of oil tankers to show that they are a threat in the region. U.S. is responding by backing with the U.K. to do a joint U.S.-led mission in the Strait of Hormuz. And that's right here. So if Iran wants to try to take on the U.S. and the U.K., it'd be my guess, but I doubt that they'd be able to do much. So yeah, the reason this is a big deal is because 21 million barrels per day of oil transmit there, and a lot of oil is transported there. So I think it's like something like 25%, so a quarter of the world's oil goes through that corridor. So it's important to know the impact that this has. Now, there's obviously talks of, where the U.S.'s other allies, they're actually trying to go with the political idea of doing Iran Deal 2.0, the one that was controversial because it kind of, was vague and let Iran do what it wanted to do without any inspection of its uranium. And that's what France, Germany, and other people are trying to do, is make a new Iran deal, and that's probably not going to work because, the U.S. doesn't have to support that because they are going to more military stance. So there's two things I want to bring up, and that is what Israel thinks about this. Obviously, Israel strongly against Iran because Iran wants to take Israel off the face of the earth because of, they think Israel is obviously a bunch of Zionists and they don't deserve a spot, and they believe Palestine should have that. That's why Iran supports Hamas and Hezbollah, two groups associated with killing Israelis. Iran wants to get out of this, that they want to show that they can, stand up on their own, and that the U.S. should stop their bullying if they know what's good for them, and if they want all these international ships to be able to go through the Straits of Hormuz without being harassed by Iranian ships. The U.S. wants to show that Iran is a threat, but it's a threat that can be dealt with stiff tariffs and stiff military stance, specifically with the U.S. Navy and the UK soon-to-be Navy arriving there to deal with that. With the U.S. sanctioning Iran to the point of, everything in a lot of countries having to force to stop trading oil to them, that could tank Iran's economy. So Iran's got to respond by doing missile tests and seizing ships to show off their kind of threat in the region is still there, regardless of what the U.S. thinks. Okay. And that's Iran. The last thing I want to go over before I end the episode is what's going on in Syria. So Syria has been a stalemate for a while. There's been small gains on both sides. But what did happen is the U.S. and Turkey have agreed on a deal called a safe zone. Now, a safe zone basically indicates where troops got to pull off of both sides to kind of like, not really like a peace, but like kind of a, what's it called? Like a stalemate move to where, I'm blanking right now. Ceasefire. That's what it's called. Ceasefire. So, the United States and Turkey have basically reached an agreement to establish a safe zone in northeastern Syria. So that's with northeastern that's the Kurds. I'm 100% sure on that. And the Kurds are obviously kind of against Turkey, and Turkey are against Kurds because Turkey believes the Kurds are terrorists, and the Kurds believe Turkey is trying to kill Kurds in the region. So that's why they don't trust each other, even though they both support the U.S. Turkey was almost going to do a military offensive against the U.S., but that would have pitted two NATO allies, like forces against each other, like it says here. So that would have caused some issues. Obviously, Turkey is not the most democratic country in NATO, and it's obviously its membership is controversial. So, I mean, we'll see what happens there. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. Is there anything else? Yeah, so they, like I said, Turkey views Kurdish militias as a top national security threat. They've been fighting a Kurdish insurgency for decades because Turkey's coast or southern border has a lot of Kurdish population, so there's been terrorism there for a while for a free Kurdish state. So anyways, I hope you guys like this episode. I hope you like the news and formal information that you received, and I hope to do this again. So thank you all for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe if you'd like to see more of this.